We are on live, Todd. So it looks like it is 7 o'clock. So it's the appointed hour to start our webinar. So let's get going with the cost segregation study and why you should care. So with that, I'll be your faithful scanner PowerPoint guy and let you do your thing here.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Adam. And hello to everybody that's on the call tonight. So yes, I will talk about cost segregation and how it can impact you as a commercial real estate professional and why you should care about what this is all about. So I want to pop it to the next slide here.
I'm going to dutifully do that.
All right. So I know everybody's time is very valuable, so I have kind of slimmed this down to just the important meat of the information and won't take up too much of your time, but we're going to cover what cost segregation is as far as a definition and just in general terms, and who qualifies for cost segregation. Of course, what's in it for you and why you should care about cost segregation, and then a little bit about the company that I work with for cost segregation, and then time for Q&A at the end as well.
Perfect.
So, first of all, we'll start off with kind of a definition of cost segregation. And the next slide.
Oh, it's my turn already? There's the burger.
There's the burger. So I don't know if everybody's had dinner or not yet, but we'll make you hungry if not. So cost segregation, as far as a definition, it's an IRS approved tax application. So it's not some crazy loophole. You know, it's definitely IRS approved. It's been around for quite a number of years now. And it's an engineering-based service. Or at least the engineering-based method is what the IRS wants building owners to use. Mm-hmm. And we're an engineering-based company to do this. So what it does is it identifies various components of a commercial property. And this will work for any kind of commercial property, office, retail, medical, warehouse, self-storage. Also works for rental properties, residential rental properties, apartments, duplexes, those types of properties as well. And what the IRS allows is for building owners to basically accelerate the depreciation deductions on their property. So a commercial building depreciates over 39 years, not to get into too many tax things here, but in a residential rental depreciates over 27 and a half years. So what it means for the owners of these properties is they get depreciation deductions each year on their taxes. A deduction is a good thing. It lowers their tax liability, lowers what they have to pay in taxes. So there's typical buildings going to have about 100 components or parts that we're able to put into a shorter depreciation life. So if they don't do cost segregation, they're doing what's called straight line depreciation, where they have everything kind of bulked into 39 years or 27 and a half years, and they get the same amount of depreciation deductions each year for 39 years or 27 and a half. So what we're able to do is take, for example, landscaping and parking lot. That can be put into a 15-year life. And other parts, you know, carpeting, cabinetry, woodwork can maybe be put into a 5-year life or a 7-year life. So what that means to the owner is they get a lot more of the depreciation deductions earlier, and more deductions, again, is a good thing, lowers their tax liability. So the reason the Big Mac is on there is you can look at that and say that's a hamburger, or you can look at it and say it's 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. If anybody on the call is as old as I am, you'll remember the old commercials probably from the 70s, I'm guessing. So that's the commercial kind of breaks out all the components or pieces and parts of the Big Mac rather than just looking at it as one whole hamburger. In other words, you got a building, or you can break it apart into all of its components and parts. So hopefully that's relatively clear as far as what cost segregation is. It's It's a way for these owners to accelerate the deductions for depreciation. They get the same amount of depreciation either way, whether or not they do this. They just get it a lot sooner. I use an example of if you win $1 million in the lottery, do you want $1 million today, or do you want $25,000 a year for the next 40 years? It's the same amount of money both ways, but most people would say, I want that million now. There's a whole lot more they can do with it, put it to good use, and get a good return on that money. So,
well, Todd, before we depart from this slide,
yeah,
and I know we're in different areas of the country right now, but a couple of the real big deals for us down here are going to be, for example, roofs, which, you know, the sun just beats to death and really kills, I mean, real quickly. And the other one that we see that's really, you know, really kind of abused down here is air conditioners. There seems to be a lot of air conditioners that are, you know, just completely wiped out very quickly. And is there kind of like a special schedule for those types of components? And, you know, is it something that we kind of need to look out for, you know, when we're looking at a building or doing a proposal?
They can be affected by cost segregation, and I will clarify here. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a tax professional, but we have those people on staff for questions that come up along the way. But yeah, a lot of parts are going to wear out faster than 39 years. So that's basically the reason why the IRS does allow this. So they're going to be able to benefit from that.
Gotcha.
So it's, you know, it's about the time value of money. Again, they get the same amount of deductions either way, but if you can basically get an interest-free loan from the IRS, and most of these owners will maybe buy another property, maybe they'll renovate, maybe they'll hire an employee and can get a good return on that money.
Understood.
So, yep.
Is it time for our next slide?
Yeah, let's do that. So this gives you a general idea of several different property types and the percentage of assets on those property types that can be reclassified into 5, 7, or 15-year life rather than 39-year life. So looking at this quickly, it looks like banks and wineries, restaurants and manufacturing are all 40% and above as far as you know, benefiting. But even if they're only reclassifying 20%, like an office or a warehouse, if it's $1 million property or $5 million property, that's still a lot of cash in the owner's pocket.
Oh, so yeah. Looks like we should all be in the banking or wine business real quick.
That's right. Yep.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It seems like you've got everything seems to be hovering in the mid 30s for the most part, especially the stuff we deal in. You know, like the hotels, stores, apartments, and medical office buildings. And that's you know, that's pretty substantial. That's a pretty good chunk of change.
Yeah, it's in rough numbers. If it's $1 million property that they have, cost segregation is going to save them around $70,000 in income taxes.
Wow!
Just as a rule of thumb. So, and when I say save, you know, CPA might say, well, they're really deferring it. Yes, they are. But if it's money they don't have to pay now, in my mind, you know, they're saving that at least right now. Well, so
yeah, and hey, let's face it, if they can put that money to better use now, I think it's better in our pockets than Uncle Sam's, certainly.
That's I would agree with that. Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yep. So let's see here. Benefits, not to dwell too long on the nitty-gritty of it, but again, I probably covered a lot of this. Hidden assets or assets that can be reclassified in commercial real estate for accelerating deductions on those items. Immediately reduces income tax liability. A lot of our clients, if they're paying quarterly estimated income tax payments, a lot of them will eliminate that for 4 quarters or 6 or even 8 quarters that they're not having to pay in, a big chunk of money. So they're happy about that. Obviously, because of that, then they have an increase in cash flow, and maybe it will open up opportunities where they can give you a call and say, hey, I want to look at another property. I've got some cash here. And So
Mm-hmm.
there's a catch-up aspect too. So if they've owned the property, a lot of our clients don't find out about this until they've owned the property for 2, 3, 4 years or more, and there's a catch-up aspect to it, so they can see a very nice savings right away the very first year.
This would be something to bring to them right away when they're acquiring the property.
That's ideal. Yep. But like I say, probably more than half of our projects, they've owned the property more than a year, and
Mm-hmm.
that's if they've owned it up to about 15 years, there's still some very good benefit there. Even if they've owned it longer, but they've put in 200, 300K in renovations in the last 15 years, they'll
Okay.
still benefit from that as well.
I was going to ask you if they have owned it for a number of years and they went and did a substantial remodeling job and or did a lot of tenant improvements. Is that something that might be worth taking a look at?
Right, and they don't even have to own the building if they lease space and they've put in 200K or more into leasehold improvements. That will qualify for cost segregation as well.
Nice. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Time for the next one?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
All right.
So I covered this, I guess, a little bit already, but just and people on the call, don't worry about knowing this really. We would sort this out. We do a free estimate for any request. We'll do a free estimate. So there's no cost to find out. So you don't feel like you've got to know these numbers. But in general, if they've got what we call a cost basis, which is the building cost excluding the land, which again, you may not know the breakout of that. But if that's around 300K and above, the owner's going to benefit from this. Sometimes there's a misconception that they've got to be $1 million building or bigger to qualify for cost segregation, and that's not the case. I mentioned earlier, if they've owned it less than 15 years or they've put some renovations into it in the last 15 years, they're going to benefit from that, and then the leasehold improvements again there.
Gotcha. Well, when we do a proposal, typically what we're looking at on the county records is they bifurcate for us what the land value is and what the building value is. So, I mean, we know generally going in, what the division is between land and improvements.
Perfect.
And, we typically also know where they are in their ownership cycle. So that's interesting. The other thing, the one I think is surprising is the leasehold improvements. I didn't realize that they actually qualified for cost segregation study.
Yep, whoever paid for that. So if your client leases and doesn't own, but they've paid for the improvements in their space, they're going to benefit from that.
Interesting. Was there anything else that we really need to know about the cost segregation study process? Well, look, here's an entire slide dedicated to that.
There we go.
I like that.
The process, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks to get everything done. It's simple as far as what the owner is, required to do. We would set a convenient time to do what we call a site survey, which is just getting photos inside and out of the property. If they've got blueprints or floor plan or appraisals that have been done, we would gather that information, and that helps us to get the study done, although we don't need that. We've done studies on 100-year-old buildings. The owner maybe bought it 5 years ago. The plans are long gone, so that's why we do what's called engineering based, so we don't need all those. But if they're available, that helps us to get it done.
Gotcha.
The fee to do a study really ranges around $3,000 or so on the low end to $12,000. That's where a bulk of them fall, but some more if it's a larger property. Return on investment typically 20 to 30 times. Just rough numbers. If they're going to save around $100,000 in income taxes, our fee might be $8,000 to do a study like that. But that all comes back on the free estimate that we'll put together for them.
Now, is your fee based on the savings, or is it just a fixed number?
Yep, it's based on just a fixed number, so it's not a percentage of the savings. Although, it does kind of coincide to a certain degree. If they're going to save $20,000 in taxes we're not going to charge them $15,000 to do the study.
Mm-hmm.
But that probably, if it's a smaller tax benefit, it's probably a smaller property. The study will be less complex to do, so it'll be a smaller fee.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Well, let me ask you this. For example, I know in my company, before we list a property, we essentially do what amounts to a full-blown appraisal. I mean, I've got one I'm thinking of right now that may be an ideal candidate. It's a 30,000 square foot retail center, 18 tenants. It's going to be about a $7 million deal for the buyer.
Yeah.
And it's been, the building's been in place since 1989.
Mm-hmm.
But would that be something you guys would be interested in taking a look at, for example, pre-sale? Just maybe to throw your hat in the ring and say, hey, look, Mr. Buyer, if you do take this down, this is one of the ways you could kind of sweeten the pot.
Right. And that's one of the main points here of talking today is that's a good thing to bring up as far as what's in it for anybody that's, commercial real estate professional. So we do a lot of those where an agent's got however many listings, you can just let me know a few things about the property or send me the marketing material that you have. Just need to know what the asking price is and what the use of the building is, the property type.
Okay.
And with that, we can run the estimate. We'd get that back to you typically within 24 hours. And, more and more owners know about this, but there's still a lot that aren't aware of it. So if you're talking to a potential buyer and you can say, an added benefit of purchasing this property you may not be aware of, it's called cost segregation. It'd save you around, $120,000 in income taxes over the first 5 years of ownership. And that could be, enough to get their ear and kind of differentiate you from anybody else that's out there.
Well, that's kind of what I was thinking, is you could potentially sweeten the deal by, let's face it, the more money that drops to the bottom line, after tax, the better the deal looks. And if if these guys are saving $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 in taxes a year, that's not a bad thing.
Right. And I don't do what you do, but possibly, if they're trying to get financing and they can show a bank, we're going to do this cost seg study, we're going to have $100,000 in additional cash flow over the first 5 years. It could possibly have an impact on, getting financing, I would imagine. Oh, yeah. Well,
the banks aren't going to get, disheartened because it's got more money, not less money. That's for sure.
Right.
They like their margin of safety.
Yep. So why involve your clients? Obviously, they're looking to you to find good quality investments, and this can be a part of that as far as helping with cash flow and financially being better for them.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the next slide is, but I'll just mention the two ways that as far as what's in it for a commercial real estate person. Again, getting estimates for anything that you have listed, so you can work in our numbers into your marketing material however you want.
Right.
The other way is, I mentioned earlier, we're going to benefit them even if they've owned the building up to 15 years. So maybe you can look back through your, electronic Rolodex or whatever, think back through the years about somebody you worked with in the past. You haven't really communicated with them in a while, but they've got some buildings. You could bring it up with them or let me know and I can contact them, and might be another reason to talk to them, get your name in front of them for future, real estate situations. And then we do have a revenue share as well. So whether it's a new property, a new purchase, acquisition, or something, you refer me to somebody that's, you haven't worked with in a while, and they've had a building for a while. We have a revenue share that would go back to you as the person referring the business to us.
Gotcha.
And, it's not as exciting as selling a, $7 million building as far as what you earn, but, it could easily be $1,000, $2,000, depending. And,
Well, that's certainly not anything that you want to sneeze at as far as a transaction goes. So,
Right.
there's your revenue sharing
There we
slide
go.
now.
I'm like a
I
slide
like
header
that.
every time here. So,
Yeah,
um,
you're right. Blowing through it, man.
yep. So 15%. So that says 800 to 1200. Just depends on the size
Sure.
of the project. So
That's still not bad for a phone call. Well,
that's
I
right.
think the thing that stands out in my mind is one, if it's going to help you make a deal, like a $7 million deal, the call, the 800 to 1200 bucks, that's just icing on the cake. That's just
Right.
added benefit.
And
But
a seven
look like.
$7 million property would be considerably more than that too, as far as the revenue share. So
Well, and it makes you look like a rock star in the eyes of the seller or the prospective buyer because you help them put, an extra $50, $60, $70,000 a year in their pocket. You're a hero.
right. Right.
So I don't see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, and these owners talk to each other, and they may say, "Hey, so and so, let me know about this. Why don't you go talk to them?" And you've got another potential client down the road.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm actually surprised that this is not a look at that. I'm actually surprised that this isn't a more well-known process because everybody for the most part knows what a 1031 tax deferred exchange is.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't tell you that I've ever run into anybody who knew what a cost segregation study was, and
Right.
that either doesn't do them or was familiar with it and conversant in the process.
Yeah, I've been with CSSI for 6 years now, and it's even changed in those 6 years as far as talking to CPAs, for example. More and more of them now know about it and are recommending it, but 6 years ago that wasn't the case as much. And this, just a point there, is that it's not something the CPA will do for their client unless they have engineers on staff to do it. So we're
I would imagine that's tough. If they're not an engineer or don't have one in their back pocket, I
right.
don't see that they're going to be equipped to do that.
Right. So we're an independent cost seg firm. We're not tied to a CPA firm. We don't do tax returns. So we step in to help with that.
Oh, look, the AICPA.
So, yep, that's kind of the journal for any CPAs. That's kind of what they go off of. But this is older. There's been a lot of articles since 2004, but they talk about cost segregation here. So we've got lots of material like that to send to owners or their CPA to substantiate what we're doing. So
Gotcha. And I was going to say, I hope that at some point we have there's what I was looking for.
There we go.
There's what I was looking for. I was looking for the how to get a hold of Todd slide.
Yep.
With that traditional Irish name of Strumpfer.
Right. St. Patrick's Day isn't. There's my number that'll ring directly to me. If you call me in half an hour, I won't be here, but tomorrow. Email address there. The top website is our corporate site, and then the one that's bestcostsegregationservices.com. That's my personal. That's got a lot of references and information on there as well.
Gotcha. And what's probably the best way of getting a hold of you? Is it email or giving you a call and getting it started that way?
Both are great. Yeah, and like I say, if you've got X number of listings right now, we're happy to do that, and there's no cost. Love to do that. So some people have even sent me to their website and say, hey, look at, we've got 4 pages of properties there, asking prices. As long as the asking price is on there and I can tell what type of building it is, just direct me to a website. We're happy to get the information off of that and get the estimates back to you.
Gotcha. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. What I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to make sure I get this out to everybody who wasn't on the call tonight.
Okay.
Also, they're gonna probably be flashing us some questions here, and I'll direct them to you.
Okay.
Because you're obviously the expert in the field and not me. I wouldn't know a cost segregation study if it hit me in the head. But if you don't mind, I'm going to share your PowerPoint.
That'd be great.
And I would like to circle back to you tomorrow because I do want to share that shopping center with you as well.
Great.
And maybe we could talk about that, kind of off camera, if you will.
Great. Perfect.
Fair enough.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity, Adam. I
Oh,
appreciate
not
it.
at all. I really appreciate you coming on the call tonight, and we'll talk tomorrow.
Sounds great. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
man. You
Yep.
too. Thanks again. Bye bye.